This week on Dig Me Out.
It unraveled quickly for me. The formula became pretty stale, and it became pretty easy to pick holes in it.
Tim and Jay review Return of the Rentals by The Rentals.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Dig Me Out. I'm your host, Tim Minichi, and joining me once again, my co-host, Mr. Jason Ziak. Jay, it's episode 189, season 4, and we are inexplicably returning to the 90s, although that is the charter of this particular endeavor. And we are going to...
Are we a spaceship?
Yes, we are. Which
What's
is
the charter of
appropriate.
this space endeavor?
To explore the unknown, Jay. And in that sense...
The most obscure corners of the galaxy.
Correct. I don't know if this one qualifies as completely obscure. Or obscure. Is obscure? Obscure? Now that word is weird to me because I just mispronounced
Lady's choice.
it. Jay, The Rentals. We're going to talk about their record, Return of the Rentals, which is actually it's a mistruth because the Rentals did not exist before this album. So there's nothing for them to return from. It's actually a lie, Jay. But nonetheless, we will investigate it. We're doing so because the Rentals happen to have a new record coming out called Lost in Alphaville. It's their third official full-length album. Their first was in 1995, so it makes sense that 19 years later they would release their third record in a Guns N' Roses-esque wait for their release.
Did Buckethead play on this?
He did not, but there were some other interesting folks who did, Jay, or at least on the new record. Well, on the new record, Pat Carney from the Black Keys plays on the new Rentals record. And on this record, you have, well, we'll get into it. I'm not going to spoil it. But Jay, I was familiar with this band thanks to the single Friends with P. Or Friends of P. Friends of P, not Friends with P. I want to make sure I get that correct. And that was a bit of a single, a bit of a hit. Not a huge hit, but it was a hit. Had some airplay, got it on the mainstream radio and whatnot back in 1995 when this album came out.
It's gonna come to me early. I get two loves in my life, and I'm dying at 90. Oh yeah, what's that?
Were you a friend of P, Jay, back in 1995?
I knew the band because there was some... obviously it made news when... Is it Matt Sharp? Is that his name?
Right.
Left Weezer to form the band.
I have to correct you there. He actually did this in parallel to Weezer.
Okay. Well, when he eventually left,
Right.
that's when I was aware of it. And then, yeah, that song was... It had its moment in time. I don't know. I guess it was kind of a hit on alternative radio. So I don't want to get into details on it because I'll spoil my review. But yeah,
Gotcha. It came, this album came out in 95. The Weezer album Pinkerton, which was their second record, came out the year after, and he played on that record, and he was a part of the band up until that record. So technically, it was released in parallel. It was a side project because Weezer drummer Patrick Wilson actually plays drums on this album. Along with some of the other people that appear are Petra Hayden from the band That Dog. She plays violin and sings. And her sister Rachel Hayden also sings on this record. And then a guy named Tom Grimley is playing Moog He does some production work on the record.
So this Groove Shark is really irritating me. Maybe this can be our discussion for the day. We need a topic to discuss. I can just rail on Groove Shark. Sorry, okay. I'm trying to just refresh myself with the record, and it keeps like creating a cue, and I just want to listen to the goddamn song.
Well, when you go down to the queue, press the play button, and then it should play.
I know, but then I'm hitting play twice.
Let me get us back on track.
You go into
here.
the history, and I'm gonna troubleshoot.
You troubleshoot. Let's talk some history of the Rentals.
History of the band.
So, as I mentioned, the Rentals formed in 1995. Matt Sharp, who's the bassist and one of the founding members of Weezer, formed the band as a side project in between records from Weezer. And their debut album came out in October of 95 on Maverick Records, which was a subsidiary of Reprise Records. As I mentioned, Patrick Wilson from Weezer played, as along with Petra Hayden and some other folks on this record. When they were working on the Weezer record, obviously this took a back seat. Weezer, after the then failure of Pinkerton, from a commercial standpoint, Rivers Cuomo went into a depression and the band basically went on hiatus. So in 1997, Matt Sharp reformed the Rentals and started working on their second record. It took a while to put the record together, a couple years actually. Members of Blur, Ash, Elastica, and Lush all made guest appearances on the record, along with a future SNL star and television movie star, Maya Rudolph, sings on two of the songs. I believe sings. I think that's her musical talent. The album was released in April of 99, and shortly thereafter, Sharp disbanded the band again. And for 6 years, the Rentals did not exist. And then in October of 2005, he reformed the band to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of Return of the Rentals, and they started doing some shows with a new lineup. In 2007, they released an EP called The Last Little Life. In 2009, Matt Sharp announced a Rentals project called Songs About Time, which is going to be a year-long multimedia project. So it had a photograph a day. It had 52 short films for 52 weeks. And then it had 3 mini albums, or EPs, released in April, July, and October that were released as digital downloads. And then the whole thing was available as one gigantic box set when it was completed. Joey Santiago from the Pixies appears on one of the EPs, and the album spawned the project spawned an additional album called Resilience, which was originally going to be part of the Songs About Time project, but ended up becoming a separate project, which was originally going to be called Tokyo Blues, that specific part of the project, and then was renamed Resilience. And it was written about a character basically suffering through the Japanese tsunami and earthquake that had taken place during that time period. And then in 2013, Dave Sardi was brought on board to help Sharp with the third official Rentals album called, as I mentioned earlier, Lost in Alphaville, which is released on August 26th of this year on Polyvinyl Records. A number of guests appear, and as I mentioned, Pat Carney of the Black Keys plays on the record. So that's the history of the Rentals. If you would like to suggest an album for us to review, please visit our request review page at digmeoutpodcast.com. Jay, we did get some Facebook feedback on this record. Bo Dure, I think that's how he pronounced her last name, Bo, said, Maya Rudolph, Petra Hayden, and Weezer guys in one band. Beautiful. Always wish they had gotten the whole group back together on occasion. And then Scott Russell Hallgrim says, always conflate these guys with the Residents, which is a different band. So Jay, let's talk some Rentals. We both were familiar with the single, Friends of P. I was really not familiar with the whole record. I was familiar with Matt Sharp, and I liked his contributions to Weezer. I always thought that he was sort of the, I guess, quirky side guy bass player, the guy who contributed, the awesome bass fuzz tone on the Pinkerton record, who did some of the weirder vocal things that happen on that record, some of the falsetto counter melodies and stuff like that. I think his departure has definitely been felt. I think if you analyze the first two records and compare them to the output since then, with it being, wholly Rivers Cuomo's band since then, I think you see it. There's a pretty stark difference in the band. I don't want to compare him to other songwriting tandems like Lennon and McCartney, or Johnny Marr and Morrissey, but I think that they definitely balanced each other in a pretty positive way. And I think that I'll just sort of transition into the record here. I think that you hear a lot of that first and some of the second Weezer album in this record. Do you agree?
I do. I knew he was an important part of the band, and there was something magic about the first two records that obviously hasn't been there since. They've kind of turned into a more vanilla version of what they originally were, and that revisiting this record has made it clear to me why that is. I think he does bring a little bit of quirkiness. I think he brings the edge, like the authentic kind of rawness and edginess to the original two Weezer records that it's just been completely lost. Now it's a very one-dimensional band. So I definitely can see that, and I think that's one of the more enjoyable parts about this record was going back, listening to it, and imagining or thinking about what he contributed to the original records, and then also even thinking about what the newer stuff could have been like had he been involved.
Yeah,
and why the hell he isn't involved.
Well, that's an interesting point of contention, because I tried to figure that out. And reading the quotes from the early 2000s, he says that he didn't quit the band. That basically the band went on hiatus, and then when Rivers Cuomo brought it back, he just didn't include him. So I don't know if there was a falling out. I mean, those guys were... at one point, Matt Sharp was suing Rivers Cuomo over songwriting royalties and stuff like that. So they've since made up, and they've performed together. But there was clearly some hostility, which often happens with songwriting partnerships. One member thinks that they need to, step up and be the lead, I guess you'd say, and then the other one sort of, gets pushed to the side, or, in a lot of cases, it's the lead singer and a lead guitar player, not necessarily a lead singer, guitar player, and a bass player who are sharing the spotlight. But maybe Rivers Cuomo felt like I need to take control of this band, and that's why he wasn't brought back. But Matt Sharp made it pretty clear that he didn't quit the band. He just never called him back.
There you have it.
Yeah,
that makes sense, actually.
Right, it does, and it's sad because listening to this record, when you hear a song like "Waiting," track 2, that totally sounds like a Weezer song. That could have been on the first record.
Yeah, I think that one also reminded me of melodically. It reminded me of Frank Black or the Pixies a lot too. He got rid of the synth stuff and he just listened to the vocal delivery. It revealed that influence quite a bit. But yeah, I agree. There's a lot of stuff on here where you could. I guess I'll just roll into one of the things I don't like about it is that not only can I can hear the Weezer potential in these songs. but it also makes me miss the guitar. I went into this record really being excited about the concept of this band, which is sonically, it's very reliant on fuzz bass and synth and drums. From what I can hear, there's very little guitar on this record, if any at all. Conceptually, I love that idea, especially when you mix in the harmonies, because you're getting a nice thick vocal. It's very reliant on solid vocal melodies, but you can do some things sonically by taking that guitar out and replacing it with other instruments. Unfortunately, there's a lot of moments where it leaves a hole, and there's nothing for the vocal to stick to. It kind of floats out in space in an awkward way. Sometimes the bass part is guitar-ish enough, or the tone is guitar-ish enough that it can kind of latch onto that. Other times they use synth strings to fill that void and create that melodic glue or counter melody, and sometimes that works. But I found some of the synths, the string stuff to be a bit odd. How did you feel about that part of the record?
Well, knowing that quite a bit of the string stuff is actually Petra Hayden playing violin, that it's not necessarily... I mean, when it's a big bed of strings, it's obviously a keyboard, but I think a lot of those instances are her maybe playing along with it to add that dimension of a live string part. And then there are some parts where she's sort of playing on her own. I like the conceit of the band, that this is a big fuzzy bass tone combined with a lot of cool analog synths. It works for me 90% of the time. I think where it fails is when they get away from the pure pop sugary goodness of Friends of P and Waiting and some of those songs, and they try to do stuff that really doesn't lend itself well to, the synth. When you're just holding down a couple of keys on a synth, it works well when you can change them quickly, but when you're dragging them out on a slow song or a mid-tempo song, sometimes it really opens up like these big holes that you're talking about, where the vocal's just kind of like laying there with nothing to latch onto. And yeah, if there had been some guitar, I really don't think there's any guitar to speak of any significance on the record. If there had been just a few choice spots where they had brought that in, I think it would have made a huge difference. I really think an acoustic guitar would have been really interesting in a lot of this, not a lot, but on a number of these songs, because it's such a sterile sound with the synth and that bass. To bring in an acoustic guitar would have really brightened things up. On just a few songs, it just didn't work for me.
Yeah, I noticed... So something like Brilliant Boy is a song that doesn't work for me at all. One, it's weird. It's too complicated for this format. And I think it's one of the songs where the bass part it's a bass part that you would write if you were relying on a guitar. So it's very locked in with the drums. It has more space in it.
You're just a stupid girl, stupid girl.
That space kind of doesn't get filled, and it makes it sound like this at times. The singer's not even, the vocal part isn't even related to the rest of the music. It just doesn't have that one element in the middle to tie the two pieces together, so that I can understand it. It's like sounds like it's literally like somebody mixed something out of it, which is, like I said, kind of unfortunate, because it does work at other times, and I like the concept. I just think there's like one instrument missing or misapplied here, and not quite sure what it is. I don't know if it's the string element that could be another instrument, or sometimes that leady kind of synth becomes a little overbearing. Becomes kind of shrill and
the car synth.
I kind of wish maybe like if they were going to bring guitar in, maybe you could do it in that way, so it's more of like a leady kind of guitar and not like chords, because the bass and the synth, it does a good job sonically of covering ground. So I mean, the record sounds big. It's not like it sounds thin or anything. It's just melodically it's missing something to really sweeten those melodies up or make them relate to the rhythm more.
I think part of that is that I think they do an excellent job. We've railed about this before of having that female vocal utilized quite a bit. I would have liked to have heard it used as a counter to his vocal more. I think that would have been interesting. It would have been nice to hear them play off of each other instead of just duplicating each other for the entire record. That's an opportunity I think that was kind of missed. There's a few tiny spots where they utilize they break them off from each other, but it's not in a significant way that I was hoping for.
It's interesting to me that I didn't realize there was two different female singers on this. So there are times when it sounds better than others. Like the track "Naive" stands out to me as one where the vocal is not quite right. Like, I don't know, it just sounds a little off to me and not quite as good.
My friends were right. Should have played it smooth. Should have tried to lie instead of being true. It's so naive. It's so naive.
I don't know if it's a different singer or if it's a matter of just the part, but it's just, I don't know. It's just not quite working for me.
You're talking about the chorus specifically? Because it almost sounds like she's off key a little bit.
Yeah. Yes.
I don't know if that's intentional or not, but
the harmony doesn't sound as good either.
Right.
Even the lead vocal, it has its good moments and moments where it's not quite as strong too. So the style that he sings in, I don't know, these, obviously not the world's greatest singer, so he's very reliant on a particular kind of delivery and then a way to layer it to make it sound. And obviously the strength of the melody is a big part of it. But there's some songs on here where the vocal is more successful than others, and that's either just it's one of two things. It's either limitations of his voice, or it's just not being helped by the rest of the music. It's kind of being left out there on its own and exposed a bit more than maybe it needs to be. If you think about something like the sonically, the approach of Weezer, that does a lot to distract you, cover up, make up for any kind of lack of vocal performance. It becomes very secondary because it all melts together so well that you don't really care. Whereas this one, I think it exposes it more and puts more focus on it. I found myself being more critical of the vocals on this record than I would ever be on a Weezer record, which was interesting.
Yeah, there's definitely it's a one-trick pony in terms of the vocal. He might change up the cadence, but he's pretty much in the same range throughout the entire record. Which I get. I mean, this is a throwback new wave record. They're not trying to do a lot of different stuff. They're just trying to make a new wave pop record, essentially, with some modern fuzz bass tone. I mean, that's essentially what I'm pulling away from this, or getting from this record. So I don't really need it to be, all that crazy. I think this album works best when it's in the 2 to 3 minute range in terms of the songs. When they start to go over that is really the three spots that bother me are Move On, Brilliant Boy, and Sweet and Tenderness, because they're all over 4 minutes. and I think that this band does not need to even get to that length of time. I think 3:30 is like the optimal time for this band, and if they can stay under 3:30, great. Because this is a band that should be following the pop format, doing harmonies with the male-female vocal, and keeping it simple. When they tried to do, like you said, try to do something a bit more experimental on like Brilliant Boy, it just doesn't quite work as well as it works on the first 3 songs in this record. Are just great killer little pop songs. And I can excuse the detour with Move On, because they come back strong, I think, on Please Let That Be You and My Summer Girl. But there's just a little bit too much reliance on some slower stuff on the back half the record, and that's not this band's forte.
I even felt melodically, while it was strong, it missed a hook sometimes, and they were there. They just they didn't repeat the right parts enough. There was a couple songs. Please Let That Be You was one example where they just got it's overly complicated in the melody. And there's some parts in there where if you just grabbed onto those and just repeated those, you'd have a much, I think, hookier song.
Alone at home, alone too long. Walk around the complex. No visitors, no oxygen. Just me, no movement. Please let that be you. Knocking on my door so loud, just like you do. Bringing a message or two. You know you are my fate and I am.
There were a couple others I felt that way about too, and just it needed potentially another level of refinement there, or production guidance, producing to hone in and really make that work, because that's what this record needs to be about. It needs to be about really simple, well thought out melodies and hooks, and then basically the minimum instrumentation you need to make that work. There's times when it works, and there's other times where it's not quite right yet. Drums are great on the record. I love what's his name? Pat something?
Pat Wilson.
Yeah. His drum sound, you can tell it's him. The way he plays, everything. Really, really enjoy the drumming on this record quite a bit, and it definitely creates a pretty solid tie between the other early Weezer records and this, between not only the familiar style of and sense of melody, but the drumming and the drum sound itself too is very reminiscent.
Well, the thing that's so great about Pat Wilson is that he's a incredibly solid drummer, that he never does anything that's like wildly overcomplicated, but he always plays something just interesting enough that it's not totally predictable. Mm-hmm. Like he just kind of always adds something, but he's keeping it simple so that it's a pop song, but still able to add just little flourishes here and there. Whether it's the way he does a fill or something, adding something to the beat, just a little something special, but he's always keeping it like rock solid pop rock territory. And he's been like sort of the, continuing force in Weezer that's able to keep that band grounded in a lot of ways.
Yeah, the drums in My Summer Girl are a great example. It's a really cool pattern, and really sets the mood and vibe of that song. And like you said, it has enough. We listened to the kick drum of that song. It just has enough going on to be interesting, but not get in the way. So
I was gonna say that's got that like jagged sort of like off kilter beat, but it's still like you can still nod your head to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's a head nodder.
Yeah,
In terms of all of his rhythms, sort of, it really has that vibe to it, and he's got a feel and a style, which is that's hard for drummers, and there's not a lot of drummers that have that, especially if you think about 90s bands. There's probably maybe a handful where you can say that they have a genuine, unique style to them, and you can pick them out, just based on a little song sample and tell it's them. I think he fits in that category.
Were you going to ask if he played on the next record? Because he doesn't.
Yeah, does he? Yeah, that's
No.
what I figured.
Different drummer.
Yep.
Any parting thoughts before we head over to review or our final review land?
Just in general, thinking about this record and getting into it, my hopes were high. I thought, based on the format and the sort of the concept around it, I thought I would like it quite a bit. And 3 songs or so in, I did. It unraveled quickly for me. The formula became pretty stale, and it became pretty easy to pick holes in it. The more I got into this record, so I guess that's my lasting impression. It just made me think, to kind of come full circle to the original point about Weezer, is neither of these two are as good as when they're together.
Right.
They both have their own little take on the same idea, and when you bring it together, it becomes this well-rounded, fun but interesting, can take on a serious tone as well. This just a nice mix of a lot of different things when you put these two guys together. When you take them apart, it becomes pretty one-dimensional. So yeah, that's what I mostly thought about as I reviewed this record.
The thing that was going through my mind was what a weird time I guess not, but kind of a weird record for 1995. Weren't a lot of synth pop bands in 1995. This is the nexus of Smashing Pumpkins releasing Melancholy. They hadn't gotten to Adore yet. This is Oasis releasing What's the Story, Morning Glory. We're the Foo Fighters putting out their first record in 95. You get like the first Filter record. The Goo Goo Dolls, A Boy Named Goo. I mean, we were still in guitar rock, not grunge, but guitar band territory. Sponge putting out their first record. Toadies, Our Lady Peace, all those debut records. Space Hog, a lot of guitar bands still existing. So it's sort of not amazing, but the fact that this weird synth pop song Friends of P got on the radio, I think is a testament to the fact that Matt Sharp's a pretty good songwriter, because that's a catchy song, which is supposedly about Paulina Poroskova, because Rick Ocasek worked on the first Weezer album, and he's married to her. Yeah. And supposedly she said, they have songs written about girls, and she was in the studio or something with Rick and said something about, or had met the band at some point and said, nobody's ever written a song about me. So Matt Sharp wrote Friends of P about Paulina. That's the story. That's the legend of where that song comes from.
Nice.
So let's go to the scale, Jay. Where the album, better EP, decent single? Where do you land?
I'm at an EP. I think I sort of summed that up in my final statement there. It starts off strong and promising, but becomes Swiss cheese halfway through. And I find a lot of the rest of the record kind of unnecessary. I had the point of the band is best made with the first 3 songs, and then you could probably choose another 2 from the middle of the record, and that would be plenty. In terms of where they are in this part of their development, maybe they explore some more ground on later records and expand things. But in terms of where they are on this record, I think you can get by with 5.
I'm gonna one up you. I'm gonna go with 6 songs, still an EP, but I think there's 6 solid tracks on this record. Not that the other ones are terrible and I can't listen to them. I just don't think that they work in this format for this band. They either need to be edited down a little bit or altered in some way. Like I mentioned, I would have liked to have heard, a little acoustic guitar thrown in there. But, if you're going to stick to your guns and making a solely synth bass record, then that's what you're doing. Who am I to argue? So that's it for the Rentals and Return to the Rentals, their debut record from 1995. Jay, did you need 30 seconds to rant about Groove Shark, or did you want to talk about something else?
So yeah, to play a song on Groove Shark, you hit play, then it adds the song that you played to a queue, and it starts playing the song. If you want to change to another song, you hit play on the next song, and instead of playing it, it adds it to the queue.
Correct.
So then I have to go down to the queue and hit play again if I actually want to listen to that song. That's insane. I figured out that if you go to there's a drop-down menu, and if you want to play a song, you can click play now. But as an interface designer, if you show me a play button and it operates as a play button the first time I click it, it should operate as a play button the second time I click it as well. And I'll just leave it with that.
And that's Jay's take on Groove Shark. If you like what you heard, feel free to leave us some positive feedback over at iTunes. And as always, you can hit up our request review page at digmeoutpodcast.com and request an album for us to review. Want to thank everybody for checking in with us, whether it's on Radio IO or Stitcher or however you listen. We appreciate it. And that's it. We've got, so I mentioned that this band has an album out. Next week, we're going to be reviewing a band that also has a release out. They're called Self. They have an EP out right now. I think it's been out for a little bit. But they're a band that a couple people suggested we check out a few years ago, and I never got around to adding them. And then they just performed on Jimmy Kimmel. So I was like, hey, wait a minute. This band's from the 90s. And I went and did some research and said, oh, they have a new EP out. Let's go check out their first record. So we're going to be doing a Self record coming up next week. So number of bands that we're going to be reviewing in the coming weeks have new releases out. So it's going to be an opportunity to hit some new, hit some old stuff and with bands or artists who have new stuff out, which would be cool to talk about. So for Jay, I'm Tim. That's it. We're done. We're out. We'll be back next week with another episode. Dig me out.
Join the conversation about this episode at digmeoutpodcast.com, where you can find links to our Facebook page and Twitter feed, as well as links to our request a review and merchandise pages.